Welcome to We Are Soccer. New feature today. It's MLS Round-Up time. So we're going to do this as a weekly feature here where I get Brooks Lambier, Soccer Syndicate Scout, to talk about the MLS, the players, the games, everything. So Brooks, welcome, man. Really appreciate you taking time out to do this.
Thank you for having me on, Craig. I appreciate it and looking forward to talking some MLS.
Yeah, man. So, as you and I have been talking, the MLS has made some big strides recently. I think in the last couple of years, it's come a long way. The Gold Cup, this past summer, I think highlighted some of the real players that this league has produced. Sure, they're not the Christian Pulisic or Weston McKennies that we all know about, but there are some really good players right now in the MLS. And some of them are heading over to Europe, but we're at the halfway point in the season, the MLS season. We know the MLS season runs a little differently than the European seasons, but at the halfway point, the MLS All-Star Game's coming up. But give us your thoughts so far on the first half of the season here and some of the surprises that caught you off guard.
Yeah. There's been a lot. Between the Eastern and Western Conference, obviously people saying the Western Conference is always usually a little stronger, but it's pretty close to the Eastern Conference right now. Some teams in both conferences kind of just falling short a bit. Atlanta kind of having the coaching switch in the middle of the season, trying to find that team continuity again, and team culture. Unfortunately, Columbus with injuries, that was a team everyone was very high on, that they'd be a top, contender in the Eastern Conference. Injuries, some gold players leaving for Gold Cup and other competitions, unfortunately, has hurt them a little bit. But Caleb Porter's dealt with that before at Portland, so I'm sure they'll figure it out, get some guys rested. Obviously, Jazzy's artist is out right now for, I think, 2 to 4 weeks. So that's going to be
hamstring injury just went down with, right? So he's actually going to miss the World Cup qualifiers coming up in September as well, it looks like.
Yeah. And that's going to be tough for Caleb and the guys. But Miguel Berry, who stepped in for them, the guy they drafted out of University of San Diego, has done pretty well to fill in. And he's been on loan at San Diego Loyal for the last couple of seasons. So, that Columbus, let's see how they turn it around the second half. Listen, the biggest standout is New England Revs. Yeah. A team that I don't think anyone was shocked that they would be at the top of the conference just by the way they played last year, but the way they're racking up 6 points every weekend and, destroying teams and, in a 4-4-2 and Bruce Arena with his own little, Bruce being the head coach and the GM and making the player decisions is very helpful. There's no one really in his way to prevent him from making the moves.
It seems to be working out really well. They've played 22 games so far. They've won 15 wins from 22 matches and drawn 4 and lost 3 for a total of 49 points. They're head and shoulders the class of the MLS, not just the Eastern Conference, but the MLS as a whole. Yes. I feel. And I think that's down to Bruce Arena, right? A lot of people know what he can do, and there's a few people who don't like him because of some of the things he's done in the past, but getting the job done out there in New England, right?
Yeah. Oh, he knows in MLS, he understands the league and he knows how to get it done. Yep. With some of the coaches, I think Atlanta and some of the other guys that hire international coaches, when you come into this league, you got to understand the time zones you're traveling in, you have a cap. Whereas in European clubs, you don't have a cap. Mm-hmm. Some don't understand the college game. There's a lot of nuances that these international coaches don't understand. But, you get a guy like Bruce Arena, who was great with the LA Galaxy. He had, his early on stint with the men's national team, did a good job. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, the last one, as we all know, with Trinidad, Tobago and everything, unfortunately. But listen, look what Bruce has done. Drafting guys like Brandon Bai, Tajon Buchanan, DeJuan Jones, getting guys like Gustavo Busca at center forward, getting guys like Tommy McNamara, Matt Polster, Matt Turner, Andrew Farrell, who's been a steady Eddie for them. And listen, when you talked with Damon the other night, and I watched the interview, it's college guys. It's veteran college guys that are good IQ guys that there's some athletes mixed in with some internationals, and there's a good culture and vibe going on. And, if you follow them on social media and such, you can tell a lot of the time there's a great vibe going on in that locker room. And, listen, that's how you win games. It doesn't matter if you play in Europe, Spain, wherever. Culture and continuity is extremely important when you want to be successful.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Another team in the Eastern Conference is kind of going with a completely different approach than that. One that I have picked up and started to follow is Inter Miami, the David Beckham owned team. They seem to be going with some older international players, bringing them over here, and then trying to integrate young players. But it just hasn't worked. I mean, they brought the coach, who's their coach at the moment, Phil Neville, and it hasn't seemed to work. I mean, currently they've won 6 games out of 19. And I think they've won 2 in the last 3 or 4 to get to that mark. They're not doing very well. Like you said, Bruce Arena has taken college guys and really elevated. He's taken high IQ guys and elevated their game and put them in a nice setting to win. It's great to see, to be honest, as a former college player. That's what you kind of hope will happen with college players who go that route. So it's really good to see. Obviously, there's another route to go with the Western Conference and the Seattle Sounders and what they're doing out there and kind of grooming young players up through their system. I know you have a little bit of some thoughts on that, right?
Yeah. Them in Philly, if you look at it, I mean, Philly was the first one to start bringing up a lot of their academy guys and playing them. And obviously, as we know, they sold Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie overseas, and they're still rolling. Just to highlight Philly just for a second, with signing Leon Flock, the young American that played at FC St. Pauli, Quinn Sullivan, an academy guy stepping in, and then Jose Martinez, Casper Shabilko, and Kai Wagner just staying steady Eddies and continuing that form from last year. Plus, probably without a doubt, probably the best keeper. Him and Turner are very close. Andre Blake, a guy they, drafted number 1 overall at a UConn a while back. So, the way they're doing stuff in the Eastern Conference and in 3rd place right now, that says a lot to the organization. Back to Seattle, Brian Schmetzer just switched it up from a 4-2-3-1 to go into a 3-5-2. And again, a mixture of veterans. Bree Diaz, Ladero was out, but guys have stepped in to fill up. João Paulo has been great this year for them. Bringing back Brad Smith to play that wing back position. Stephen Fry's out, so Stephen Cleveland has stepped up, along with Spencer Ritchie. So, and then obviously you have the Dancing Bear, Will Bruin, who went to Indiana, who's stepped up as well. So, and then bringing up academy players. I watched that game against Austin where they started 5 guys. And they were all under the age of, they were all 19 and younger, which was amazing.
That's
Danny
Leyva. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. I think there was 2 16-year-olds, 2 17-year-olds, a 19-year-old. I mean, that's nutty.
Yeah, no, it's great. And
they won the game.
Exactly. And I think that speaks to not only Seattle's academy, but that second team, that championship team in Tacoma Defiance, just getting kids to play and getting them in the environment and challenging them and, bringing them up into the first team practice and getting them adjusted to what they do in the first team. So what Brian Schmetzer has done is just great. And then having Christian Roldan and then drafting his brother Alex, converting Alex from midfielder to a wing back has been great. Alex has gotten to the El Salvador national team, and then Christian's obviously gotten some minutes with the U.S. national team, but he's always been a steady Eddie. I remember when he was at Washington, I got to see him at Michigan State play in the Elite 8. And I mean, that kid was phenomenal. You could tell he was going to be a pro right away. Nice. And then, Papa Raul Ruiz-Diaz, just a guy that's a goal scorer. I mean, what more could you want? Just consistency from that and a good team culture. And heck, that's why they've been able to win big games and stay at the top of the Western Conference.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Spencer's done a great job over there, playing the youngsters, mixing them in with the older guys and just getting the job done. One team that's not getting the job done and they could find their coach on the hot seat pretty quickly is LAFC, right? Bob Bradley. They've played 20 games and won 6 and lost 9. So not quite they're not meeting the expectations that are kind of been set out because there's heavy expectations from that team and who they have and where they're playing in. So thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough one because I mean, we all know Bob has high expectations for that LAFC roster, and he wants a lot of Carlos Vela. Unfortunately, Carlos Vela has had a lot of nagging injuries. This season and then last season. And guys, there's been mistakes at certain points. Unfortunately, Brian Rodriguez didn't really work out for them, so they sent him out on loan. Diego Rossi has been a good player for them. They've rotated a lot of guys between their second team now, which is the Las Vegas Lights, who they affiliate with, and they brought young guys in and out, and they're still trying to find that their way, I think. And listen, Bob Smart, he plays a great brand of soccer. Bob wants to play a great style of soccer for those LAFC fans. So don't expect anything to change, but I'm sure Bob will figure it out. And, they're only in 8th place. They're not far off. It was from San Jose. They're only 3 points behind them, with Portland 1 point ahead of them. San Jose had to change things up a little bit, and Matias Almeida has stopped man marking, and they won twice this past week. So, a lot can happen in this Western Conference. All these teams know each other very well. I would say one thing, a big standout for me has been the Colorado Rapids.
I was going to say the Colorado Rapids are having a heck of a year right now, man. They sit in the 3rd spot in the Western Conference and only 5 points out first. And they had some players missing for the Nations League and the Gold Cup, and now those guys are back. So that could hopefully propel them on a little bit more.
Yes, and I think what's been very unique with Colorado is that when they've needed to fill spots, they haven't gone into the international market. They've signed other guys from other MLS teams or traded for them. And I think that says a lot, about Colorado, that they can find guys to fill in. But I think it speaks a lot to what Robin Fraser's done. I mean, that Colorado team was, for the past couple of years, has been struggling to even, get on the borderline of even trying to make the playoffs. And now you have guys like Colin Acosta, Sam Vines, a guy they drafted out of the University of Denver, Andre Shinyashiki, who stepped up and scored goals. Keegan Rosenberry stepped in. Laos Abubakar comes off the bench every once in a while. So they figured it out. And that's great to see that Colorado's finally kind of figured it out, because they were always usually one of the better Western Conference teams in the past.
I think then, they find that diamond in the rough, right? Like you mentioned, Kellen Acosta, he was at FC Dallas for a couple of years and was highly touted, but then just kind of lost his way a little bit. Made his way over there to Colorado Rapids and has taken off and is now, a central figure for the U.S. men's national team with Greg Berhalter, and has really come alive in the last couple of years here because of his work that he's been doing in Colorado. So they and Sam Vines as well, right? They seem to find their way. They find a diamond in the rough and get the most out of them. Obviously, the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference, top 7 teams make it into the playoffs. And we're halfway through the season here. We're at the halfway point, which means the MLS All-Star Game is coming up, and that comes up in a couple of days. Can you tell us a little bit about the MLS All-Star Game this year and how it works and some of the fun things around it?
Yeah, I think this year it's a little special because they're going to add Liga MX All-Stars. So as we know of, if you got anyone watches CONCACAF Champions League, I know not a lot of people do, but I do for sure. It's, you're going to get that, that U.S. men's national team bit, Mexican national team rivalry with some of the guys in the roster. And, you got the fun skills competition they did last year. And I think they're tweaking it a bit, but I mean, usually, the MLS All-Star team they'll bring a club over from Europe. Obviously the season was adjusted and pushed back a bit because of COVID. So that's why they couldn't do it this year. But I mean, it's interesting. This is interesting to see, because does this speak to maybe that there's a merger eventually between Liga MX and MLS by doing this? Liga MX has come out, I think, in the past few days saying that we don't want to lose any more players to MLS. We want to keep our guys, and Liga MX has changed their structure a bit. They're not doing pro rel anymore. They're that league financially, there's teams that are really have a lot of money, some that don't. So it's not very, there's not a lot of parity as there is in MLS. So it'll be a fun one though. I mean, you got guys like Chicharito, Pizarro, playing against a lot of the guys they know from the Mexican national team. So it should be a good time. And out in LA, I mean, what more diversity could you want within a great stadium with some nice weather? So
exactly. Do you expect it to be more of a fun game, or do you expect it, because it is more Mexico USA type based game, to get a little chippy? Because you would hate to see any injuries, but it could get a little chippy when guys want to, when they care about winning.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, if you're gonna, guys that play in the national teams, obviously, Mexico took the last two on the chin, so I'm sure they're gonna want to kind of get stuck in a bit more. Unless MLS has said, hey, let's kind of keep this, nice and clean, and let's try to mind the tackles, League and League MX have maybe talked about, but listen, it'll be fun. I think there'll be goals to be scored, hopefully. Sometimes that's not the case in every MLS All-Star game. Sometimes it comes down later, goes to penalties.
Yep.
But hopefully it'll be a good one. I mean, everyone always wants to score goals, but hopefully we can see a solid match of possession and not in some up and down action. And I'm sure they'll mic up some guys and everything. And that was fun. I remember when they mic'd up Walker Zimmerman a few years ago and catch him chatting and everything. And that's always a fun thing to watch.
Yeah, I hope they do some fun things like that as well. But I also hope it's a decent game, right? You don't want to see one of those games where it's 7-6 and it's not really competitive and there's no defense. It ends up like an NBA All-Star game. You don't want to see one of those. Yeah. You do want to see them get stuck in a little bit, but no injuries and taking it serious enough, but not to the point where anybody really cares. So lots to look forward to. As we said, I think the MLS is doing some really good things. It's taken a long time to get to this point, but they've built it. We could go on all day about the pro rel situation, but that's not how this league is built. That's not why owners bought into these teams in this league, because there's no promotion and relegation. So I know a lot of people who don't like the MLS. You know what? Just, you don't have to like it. Just appreciate it for the sport and the soccer and the players who play. There's a lot of good players playing. There's a lot of ways for American soccer players to get to this league and use it as a springboard to other leagues. So, I think people should do what kind of you and I are doing. Just appreciate it for the sport of soccer and enjoy what's out there and not worry about a lot of the politics and what it could be and what it should be. So, I mean, well, Brooks, I don't know if you want to add anything else, but obviously we're going to look forward to doing this every week with you. A good MLS Roundup feature here. Anything to add for this week, my friends?
Yeah, I mean, the second half of the season will be interesting to see how teams kind of turn around. I mean, like New York Red Bulls, we'll see how they turn things around. They're always a gritty team that somehow can squeeze out, get into the 7th spot. Unfortunately, the bottom 3 teams, Cincinnati and Chicago, just haven't been able to figure out, unfortunately. I mean, Raphael Wicki, it's been a struggle. Some people have been, he needs to get canned. Is it time for him to go? They've signed some guys, academy players who've been playing. So that's a question. Cincy, they've given, the GM's now gone. They have a Dutch coach in there and they look ho-hum every week. So that's interesting. Can Miami make a push? And I think, the Western Conference will be interesting. I think you'll see a lot of rotation, between these 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 spots. Vancouver's come out of nowhere. They were not very good at the beginning of the year, but they found some wins of late. They've added some guys to improve the roster a bit. And, I think, did we expect Austin to be there? Maybe. I don't know. I thought they had a decent team. I thought maybe Tab Ramos would have turned a little around in Houston, but I think that's a project, and I think Tab will turn that around because he was such a good coach for the US U20 national team. And then Dallas, got a team that loves to play their young players. They sold, Tanner Tessman over to Venecia. And then Sporting KC selling Busio to Venecia as well. So, SKC we'll see how they're going to battle with Seattle as well, because Peter Vermees doesn't want to miss the MLS playoffs. He's a competitor, so he wants to make the playoffs and win MLS Cup every year.
It's interesting in the Western Conference that all three teams are in the bottom there in 11th, 12th, and 13th of the Texas teams. You know, you've got Dallas, Austin, and Houston. All three of them are in the last spot there, occupy the last three positions, which is a bit strange. I wonder if the Texas Heat has anything to do with it. But it is a little strange. But yeah, I do see that Western Conference moving in around those middle teams to get to that 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th spot. But anything can happen. One thing I can say is I don't see the Revolution slowing down on the Eastern Conference. I see them just plowing right ahead and getting their job done, and they've got to be the odds-on favorite to get into the playoffs and win the whole thing, right?
Yep, I would say so. I would definitely say so. I mean, listen, Seattle has gotten there a lot, and you know they didn't win it last year against Columbus, but they've made it there, and they've shown why they deserve to be there. So if we see a Revs Seattle MLS Cup, you know, I'm good with that because that'll be some good football.
Absolutely, that'd be great. Some great soccer to watch. Well, lots to look forward to as we're only at the halfway mark of the season. So you guys can expect a lot more of MLS Roundup every week from We Are Soccer, Brooks and myself. All right, Brooks, we'll wrap it up, and we'll say thank you again, and we'll see you next week, my friend.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it. See you next week.
Thanks, bud. See ya.
Yep.